Black Dragon, Sovereign, Mr. Alan Davis. So that's Chris Claremont. You may heard of him. Right next to me is Alan Davis, known for Excalibur, Clandestine, X-Men itself, JLA the Nail, many, many other things. Alan Davis. Spider-Man, Superman, the character, all sorts of stuff. So, gentlemen, first X-Men at 50. How did the X-Men get started? Where did they come from? Who invented the X-Men? And how did they come to be?
I guess the simplest answer is Stan and Jack.
Yeah. And were they big hits from the beginning?
You got to be kidding. No, the X-Men were...
The point of the interview.
I'm afraid you'd have to ask Stan as to where it all came from. But the sad reality of the initial series was that it was always sort of the bastard stepchild of the line for, I guess, the 6 years of its existence. I first became aware of it, well, not became aware of it. My involvement started, I guess, in 1969. When I was working as a gopher at Marvel. And the distinction then was that the first fortnight I was there was when Neil's and Roy's first issue of their run on Uncanny came in Make Ready, which is essentially a printed book in all but the cover that we get to have a last look at to make sure everything's okay before it gets printed. And in the course of those weeks, the next issue came in from Neil as inked. Well, came in from Neil in pencils and came in from Tom Palmer as a finished book. And the privilege was getting to see the series in all the forms of production. And it was, to coin a phrase, something brilliant. You know, you look at that and it's like, wow. Trouble is, my job was dealing with fan mail, which actually came from the post office. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term post office. That's where you write your words on a piece of paper and stick it in an envelope and put it in a box. And it is magically transported across the country, or around the world even, to its destination. Anyway, and I had to deal with letters saying, who is this guy, Neil Adams? Bring back Werner Roth. He did wonderful stuff. And I had to say, what? Because, I'm sorry, this was Neil kicking butt. So, of course, it didn't sell. Actually, it did sell, but they didn't find out about it until 9 months after Neil and Roy had left the book for other projects. And the series had been canceled. And it stayed on hiatus for about 5 years. And then in 1974, 1975, Roy talked to Len Wein and Dave Cockrum, and they put their heads together and started working on revamping the team and bringing it back as a more international, exciting group. And since at that time I'd come back to Marvel as Len was about to become editor-in-chief, I was his number 2 as associate editor. And my office was right outside his, and I kept, oh, you guys are working on the X-Men? X-Men are cool. Can I help? No. Please? No. Go away, Chris. No. I mean, hey, this is a great idea. You want to know how to get rid of Krakoa? Well, you could just sever the lines of force, and they'll go flying off into space. And Len said, okay, and took the idea, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And how did you end up as the writer of the book? Did Len went on to other things?
Well, Len had got his writing assignment was 4 monthly series a month, and he didn't have time. Something had to give. The X-Men was a bi-monthly that no one thought would last more than 6 issues. So he said, I need some poor fool to write this with Dave Cockrum. And since I was right outside his door, I kind of said, I will. And after about the 373rd I will, I said, oh, shut up, here, take it, go. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And did you take a conscious, your work on that seemed to herald kind of a new approach to the original Lee Kirby Marvel way of doing heroes. Is that a conscious thing, or just because you were younger, you naturally wrote them in a different way?
I just wrote them the way they felt wrong. I wrote them, Dave and I came up with cool stories. Dave drew brilliantly. I took it from there. It just seemed, I did what came naturally.
But I think you're known for kind of emphasizing the interpersonal stories and the personalities and the quiet moments, which were not necessarily a hallmark of comics or Marvel comics. Was that something you thought about, or again, just came instinctively?
No, it was life. I mean, you've got these 7 interesting people. Dave had designed a whole host of brilliant characters, visual characters, put them in a room together. They can't just punch heads all the time.
And
So they talk. And, I mean, it's like you go over to a friend's house to play video games. Do you immediately look for, another group of malefactors to punch out in real life? No, you talk about, if you pardon the expression, what's going on in the world. I'm just going to use a 4-letter word. This is reality. And like I said, it was doing what seemed utterly natural.
Alan, when did you first notice and become involved with the X-Men?
Well, noticed the X-Men. I'd seen the X-Men right from the start. From the Lee Kirby ones, they were reprinted in Britain in black and white in a magazine called Fantastic or Terrific, one or the other. So I'd always known about the X-Men, always followed them, and I pretty quickly got onto the relaunch. It was a title that I liked in the original incarnation, so as soon as I knew there was going to be a new incarnation, I immediately went for it.
And was it as popular in England as in the States?
I couldn't really say how popular it was in the whole country. For me, I lived in a small town, and I was just looking to get it on a regular basis, a fairly regular basis. There were some titles that I missed, which was frustrating, because it was usually the second part of a story that we're missing.
But they were recapped perfectly, I'm sure.
That's not enough. You want to have the complete set. I mean, you're not a collector if you're happy with the recap.
And when did you start working professionally in comics? What was your first gig?
The first thing I worked on was Captain Britain. Which, strangely, was one of Chris's first gigs many years before.
You're looking at a rare group of 3 people who worked on Captain Britain at different times.
And all 3 of us got fired. From Captain Britain.
I didn't like it.
Oh, damn.
Me neither.
I quit. I left for reason fields. Although I did try it out, it wasn't.
Was that with Deskin?
No, Deskin had worked at Marvel UK, but he was long gone, and it was Paul Leary who was the editor chief when I was at Marvel UK.
I learned the fatal mistake of never get into a creative argument with Stan's younger brother. Because if push comes to shove, you're not going to win the fight.
So when John Byrne came on, how did that affect the vision or the duration of the X-Men?
He drew a lot faster. We went monthly, basically.
Yeah.
We went monthly. Dave appealed to the cool, the side of me that loved, hey, let's do a double page of aliens fighting in outer space around a binary star system 55 billion light years from Earth. And it was like, wow, this is cool. So we drew Lalandra's army having a fight, and then we brought the Lalandra to Earth, and then we did, hey, let's do leprechauns. Cool. The beauty with Dave was that you could come up with anything, and he would find a way to present it to you in a visually breathtaking, unexpected, and altogether, holy cow, you could draw this in comics? Attitude. It was wonderful. It was impassioned. It's like, we seemed to create characters every time we took a breath. It's like, hey, who are the Starjammers? Well, it's Cyclops' dad and his alien friends. And it's like, wow, this is sort of weird, but neat. And his favorite character was Nightcrawler, which is why Kurt, have three swords, we'll travel. Logan was okay, but not his favorite. The distinct differentiation when John came on the book was that in certain respects the stories came much more down to earth. With Dave you had the guy who drew the Legion of Superheroes for 2 years, and inventing cool aliens was like breathing. It was fun, it was natural. With John, he could do all the stuff that Dave did, but he looked at it from a more level, dare I say, Canadian perspective. Oh yes, and he liked the little guy. And suddenly, Logan moves up the food chain, and never sort of let go. And
Sort of clawed his way to the top.
with a little help from his friend. And then, we killed off the redhead.
I think people may have heard about that.
Oh yes, and condemned the future to a never-ending dystopia ruled by giant robots.
We're fans of never-ending dystopias ruled by giant robots. That's good. Your robot masters will reward you well for that. Now I know that when Louise Joan Simonson came aboard as editor, she became an important part of the collaborative and creative process.
She was just the brains.
Can you talk a little bit about how she affected the evolution? And the role of an editor in general?
Well, ideally the role of editor is to get out of the way and be available whenever the creative team, the writer, needs a sounding board. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're pitching a story that's a Cotswold, you know it. You just have to be pitching it. And a good editor knows how to listen and knows what to do when the writer realizes this is a disaster, which is, have you thought of this character? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we could do this, or this, or this. The thing with Wheezy is, aside from being one of the 3 most charming human beings on the planet, and one of the better writers in the world, and one of the demon editors in the world, and, you know, with Walter, just a creative team that is breathtaking. She trusted the people that she worked with, and you trusted her. And so a plot session with her was just two folks sitting down, exchanging ideas and coalescing them into a storyline that was hopefully good, but surprisingly in many cases turned out to be great. And it's the job of an editor is not to impose their will on the book. It is to get the writer to come up with an idea that essentially imposes the editor's will on the book, but makes it all, the writer think it's all his idea.
Yeah.
So everybody's happy.
And so the Dark Phoenix saga, that she...
Well, that wasn't Lucy, that was...
She came on at
That was Celebrate.
Well, that was a combination, was that right?
No, she came in at the end when
Yeah.
we were all ready to kill each other.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
Salicrup had happily greenlit the story and not told Jim, which apparently there's a problem when you expunge a species of 5 billion people and there's no consequence. You know, mass murder, genocide, it's only a comic book, don't worry about it.
And so when Shooter decided that had to be changed, was the museum place, or was that...
Well, that was the point
she
where,
walked into that.
yeah, that was the point where Jim, she was going to take over the next issue anyway, and Jim decided time to jump in with both feet off the top of the head. I was actually drunk at the time, so I'm sorry. This is a really annoying moment because you know, having built up to this for 15 issues, 2 years worth of work, the culmination of everything that John and I were trying to do, have it all resolved, have John working on 138, and at the very last minute be told, you've screwed it really badly. It's like, you couldn't have said this when we turned in the plots? The flip side, of course, was that it required an instant rethinking of the concept, a hefty weekend's work, an infinitely better ending, and a structure and a moment that gave the book a credibility that no other series had at the time, and would have had to this day if not for X Factor. And so it was one of those rare occasions where a disaster worked out for the best for everybody in the end.
A benign disaster. Alan, you came...
It was a benign disaster, but it was a disaster that had a happy ending.
For everybody. Alan, you came in to the X-Men when it was an established engine of popularity and the sales. Was that intimidating? And working with Chris?
Well, actually, I came into the X-Men much later than the opportunity that it presented itself, because when I first started working for DC on Batman and the Outsiders, Chris actually phoned me within hours of me agreeing to do Batman and the Outsiders and said, will you work on X-Men? And I said, no, I'm sorry, I've agreed to work on Batman and the Outsiders. He said, if you signed a contract, I said, no, but I want to stick with it. The reality of the situation was I was just terrified. I thought I don't want to be someone that goes on to the Xbox and kill it, you know, because it's like the big hits, it's success. I was intimidated by Chris as a writer, by the stories that he'd done. So it took a couple more years before I had the confidence to do anything. And by that time, Chris came up with the idea for Excalibur.
I mean, the thing with Alan was that, and I knew this from reading the stuff that he did with Alan. There was a 2-year period where I kept getting the Allens confused. It was very annoying. And they looked nothing alike, thank God. What I found was someone whose kinetic storytelling was as good as anyone I'd seen.
And at that point, you know, you're talking Dave, John, Frank,